Despite a lot of hate, the First Orders Mandator IV class siege dreadnought definitely fills a niche within the Star Wars galaxy. Its large, orbital autocannons can precisely devastate ground-based targets and perhaps even test a planetary shield, while also outranging and outgunning opponents during space battles. That being said, the Mandator IV has several key and even easily exploitable flaws which keep it from being truly great. The first and most obvious flaw comes with weapon placement. Likely because of the extreme power requirements of the Mandator IV's autocannons, the ship possesses only minimal point defense cannons and no traditional turbo lasers, so really the ship is structured around this one key feature, with minimal defenses or secondary offensive capabilities. Now, this isn't necessarily problematic, as specialized ships can be nicely fit into otherwise well-rounded fleets. However, the specialization here is not done well. The way the remaining energy and weapon resources are allocated frankly makes no sense. We initially learned when the Dreadnought was revealed that the vessel has 26 point defense cannons, which we see Poe mostly destroy in The Last Jedi. However, I assumed that the ventral side of the craft was also armed by protective cannons. But in fact, at least from what we can see in The Last Jedi, that's not the case. There are what look like sensors and little nodes, but no actual defensive emplacements. There's an obvious problem here. Sure, the bridge is an obvious target and must be defending, as the loss of the bridge will cripple the Dreadnought, but if you manage to attack and destroy the autocannons, you've also essentially removed the only useful aspect of the ship. There's really no reason not to spread the defenses across the entirety of the ship, dorsal and ventral side, especially where the large autocannons are so exposed. I can imagine a flight of Y-Wings just absolutely demolishing the ship's main guns. The Resistance was extremely foolish not to take advantage of this during the Battle of D'Qar. Are you telling me if Poe shoots a proton torpedo inside the muzzle of that gun, there won't be serious damage? Alternatively, we saw what the payload of those star fortresses was able to do to the Dreadnought, albeit when it hit a weak spot. Surely one Resistance heavy bomber has enough munitions to disable the autocannon. And by the way, because I know people will comment on that statement, the bombs are launched magnetically, and they're pretty far away from D'Qar, so it's not like gravity is preventing them from shooting quote-unquote up. Now obviously, that's not nearly as cinematic, and I understand the design choices from a filmmaking perspective, but we're being nitpicky here and looking at things in universe. The Mandator IV not only continues the Star Destroyer style battleship in space, but logically it now makes even less sense. The Star Destroyer has at least some ventral batteries, and the most important parts of that ship are also on the surface. Another thing I'd like to point out is that the main dorsal guns are actually huge. I didn't notice this until I actually looked closely at the art book, but if we look at the movie, we can see that the guns actually have windows and are full towers. Not unlike a traditional turbo laser battery, for example. I think it would be better instead to have a mix of these large guns, but also smaller weapons, which could move and fire more quickly. That would definitely help against fighters, because right now, what's the point of the weapons even? Kennedy himself says that the X-Wing is too close and moving too fast for them to get a target, but they also don't seem to be turbo lasers, and they're specifically called point defense cannons, so it's sort of like the worst of two different weapon types. Now, a counter argument to all this would be that the Dreadnought is usually at the rear of a fleet and would be protected by other ships. Well, it wasn't in The Last Jedi, and presumably that situation wasn't so unique that it would never be duplicated. Besides, if you're gonna build a ship, you might as well build the best ship you can within your capabilities. Speaking of, the Mandator is meant to be a fleet killer. Why not invest more into it? The flat surface looks cool visually, and we know from the TLJ art book that it was designed specifically at the request of Rian Johnson, so Poe would have a flat surface to fly over. But if we're being pedantic and ignoring cinematic quality and filmmaking, which we typically do because it's fun and we're in universe, there's no reason why not to include more bulk within the ship's main body. Have some of the Star Destroyer style terraces. Not only do you have more room just for whatever whatever you want, but you can also avoid having the large airfoil style bridge. More bulk means more power generators, cannons, starfighters, and more survivability. This ship is already 8 kilometers long, and likely extraordinarily expensive. Let's not let it be blown up by a single heavy bomber. If I were a Kuat or First Order shipbuilder, I think I'd take the Mandator IV as a full command vessel. It's already most effective when it's safely near the back of the formation, and we know that it has great sensor and likely communication equipment. I'd beef it up, give it a bunch of starfighters, and in most engagements, the Mandator IV would be dictating the course of battle, protected by other Star Destroyers, but it would still have enough turbo lasers and laser cannons to defend on its own. But the fact that it can outrange and outgun most of its contemporaries is a huge advantage. However, I find it wasted on a ship, otherwise filled with defensive flaws. But that's just my opinion, and I would love to hear what you think. Am I wrong, and does it make sense to concentrate most of the point defense cannons on the ship's dorsal side? Am I being too harsh, not harsh enough? Let me know all of that and more in the comments. Today's question comes from one Fated Gunner, who asks whether the Covenant Empire would stand a good chance against the Yuuzhan Vong. For one, I think the Vong probably have more ships, but I'm going to ignore that. I think the main weakness of the Covenant is that they're fairly rigid in their doctrine. The New Republic and later the GFFA were only successful because they were able to adapt to Yuuzhan Vong technology, come up with innovative new strategies, and sometimes even fight dirty or dishonorably. I don't think the Covenant, particularly under the leadership of the Prophets, have that same level of leadership or flexibility. That being said, I think the elites would have a fun time fighting the Yuuzhan Vong warriors, and things like Yamosks, which decimated the Star Wars galaxy, would be able to be handled by things like Covenant AI. But I'm curious to think what the chat thinks of this idea and whether they'd like to see a full video. Anyway, until next time guys, I hope you enjoyed. May the Force be with you.